gallop through a way of describing what the changes are to the NHS. For those of you who know a great deal about it, this won't be new, but there may be people here who are not as familiar with this extremely complex arrangement. So I'm going to try and explain it very briefly. And I'm going to sit down because I don't want to stand in front of the screen, but if you can't hear me, just say so. So what we're going to do is to follow the money, and that will explain how the system works. This is the current arrangement. The money starts at the Department of Health, goes down through the Strategic Health Authorities and to the PCTs, and the PCTs plan the National Health Service at the moment. And the planning of the National Health Service is called commissioning. That's the technical term for it. And the money from the PCT on your left goes down to GPs, so they pay for general practices, they pay for the hospitals, and they pay for community services, more or less. That's changing as well. Now, in order to understand how the money moves, you have to understand this concept of payment by results. Payment by results is what's currently driving the NHS, and you have to realise that for every patient, you have a pot of money that's attached to you. So you are a vehicle for transporting money across the National Health Service. So for a hip replacement, that has a certain tariff. That costs the same everywhere across England, the same in Newcastle as in New Cross. And the idea is that if a patient chooses to go to a particular hospital, then that hospital will get the money for doing the hip replacement. If they don't choose to go to a particular hospital, that hospital won't benefit from the money that they will receive for doing the hip replacement. So the idea is that there will be that there is now competition between hospitals, and that because there is no difference in the cost of a hip replacement in different parts of the country, the only thing that hospitals can compete on is quality. That's the theory. So that's the current arrangement. The more the hospitals do, the more money they get. That's the principle of payment by results, which of course is really payment by activity. Now the current arrangement also, I'm still describing what is currently available, what the current planning is. In contrast to payment by results, we also have something called practice-based commissioning. And the idea is that the PCT donates some money to practice virtually. It's not a real budget for the practice. But if they can safely keep people out of hospital, so for our hip replacement person, if they could, for instance, give them physiotherapy or Tai Chi or yoga or something like that, instead of a referral to hospital, then that money that gets saved will be reinvested in the NHS. And these alternatives, like yoga or Tai Chi, could be private providers. That's the current arrangement. Is that clear so far?
Yeah.
So far, so good. All right. So the current situation is this rather peculiar design for the NHS, which is that hospitals are trying to suck patients in to get more money, and GPs are trying to keep people out to save money, and that's described as a sort of constructive tension in the system, or it might be a waste of energy, whichever you describe. It's a funny way of designing the system, but that is the current arrangement. Now we're going into the future. So this is what the coalition have designed and want to implement. So you will recall that the money, we're still following the money came down from the Department of Health and came to PCTs through Strategic Health Authorities. Those bodies disappear from April, if this all comes, April 13, if this plan comes into place. The money goes directly to GPs. So they will be doing the commissioning. They will be planning, we will be planning the NHS. And GPs are in a very strange position in this new world because we've never done this before, so we don't know how to do it. We're incredibly busy in any case, and most of the polls show that GPs don't want to take this direct responsibility and have these direct budgets themselves, but there will be no option. It'll have to be done. But it is also important to realise that a number of GPs see this as a real opportunity for taking control, taking a sort of degree of power that we've wanted and never actually had before. So that's the GP side of it. The box in the middle there is the planning function, the commissioning function that previously was done by primary care trusts. And now, primary care trusts won't be there. So the GPs will have to find somebody to do this work. And they might re-employ the people from PCTs who are currently being sacked. They might use the local authority expertise, but they're also very much encouraged in the new world to employ private companies to do the commissioning. And this is a serious new change in the system, that private companies would start planning the National Health Service, and this has never happened before, and has enormous potential risks to it. And then the commissioning would nonetheless plan for hospital services and for community services. So that's the first two really big changes. And is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is slightly complicated. I'll try and do it quickly. The consortium, there's going to be a peculiar arrangement in which the GP groups, although their job will be to plan their NHS and the local services, say for Lewisham, the way the system will be arranged will make it extremely difficult for the GPs to actually plan the NHS. Because the arrangement is that any arrangement that would particularly, for instance, say, well, we're going to deal with Lewisham Hospital, we're going to send some of our patients to King's and some of our patients to Guy's, that will be deemed anti-competitive. So planning with our local hospitals will no longer be allowed, and we will have to have something called any willing provider, which means that a whole range of private companies and so on would be able to offer services, and it will make it very difficult for GPs to plan. So there's going to be a process of fragmentation in the NHS that has also never been there before. And these contracts are likely to be subject to commercial confidentiality, so we actually won't be able to know very much about who is doing what, how much it costs, and so on. That will be much less likely to be public property. In addition, the government are asking for every stage of the patient's journey, from referral to diagnosis to treatment, for people to be asked for choice and to be sent to many different places. So again, it will be very difficult for GPs to control that kind of process. So actually planning becomes extremely difficult. It becomes a sort of competitive free-for-all in the NHS, a deregulated kind of service. And there are a set of conflicts of interest that are built into this system. The GP group, if they pay £10,000 for this particular set of processes, like hip replacements to be done across there, if, consider another situation where instead of paying all that money, they manage to save this amount, which will be called a quality premium, that will go back, not into the NHS pot as a whole, but it will actually be paid to GPs as an extra payment. So there's going to be almost certainly, I'm not sure this is 100% agreed, but there will almost certainly be a personal incentive for GPs to save money in the NHS. Is that clear? Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
We are really anxious that we don't spend a whole hour up here talking at you. So, but there's so much to convey. We want people to be very clear as we can. So just ask Brian to brush on. We have a general discussion at the end.
So that was an opportunity to offer less and conflict of interest. There's also an opportunity for GPs to personally make money out of this process. So if you imagine this consortium or a set of GPs actually own part of the process, so they might own the yoga service or the Tai Chi service, or even part of the hospital. So if the consortium then refers people to that process, the members of that consortium would actually earn money by referring to themselves. And that's also built into the system and is also likely to be subject to commercial confidentiality. So there are some enormous conflicts that are built into this new design. And therefore there are huge risks to patients. Apart from the benefit cuts and all the other cuts that we know about, which are going to impact on health, and the cuts to the NHS now, There are going to be longer waits. The planning and the coordination of the service will get worse. It's very likely that services will have to be reduced. And eventually we think that there will be a core offering which will then, for richer people, will be able to be topped up. You will be able to pay for extra services. There's no reason why that couldn't happen in the new design. And as I've explained, GPs have a conflict of interest. So this is a totally different arrangement. It's not evolution, it's a revolution. That's it. Thank you very much.